A man covered in sores lay on the ground, competing with dogs for crumbs falling from a table. On the other side of the door, someone dressed in purple and fine linen was feasting sumptuously every day. They lived on the same street, breathed the same air, lived under the same sky, but there was a chasm between them that not even death could reverse, only reveal. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 16, paints the scene with surgical precision. Did the rich man have a name? The text is silent, but the beggar, he had a name, Lazarus, which in Hebrew means God helps. The irony cuts deep. The one who seemed forsaken by God carried the divine promise in his very name. The one who seemed blessed wasn't even worth remembering. You see, there are things in the Bible that seem simple when we read them quickly, but when we stop to really look, it's as if the page is on fire. This parable of Jesus is one of those. It's a mirror placed before us, reflecting chasms we may not even know we're digging. Let's draw closer to this scene. Ancient Jerusalem, narrow streets, the relentless heat of the Middle East. The houses of the wealthy had high walls and gates. Every morning the gate would open. The rich man would step out to his affairs. His purple robe, a fabric so expensive only nobles could wear it, brushed the ground where Lazarus lay. The scent of costly perfumes mingled with the stench of open sores. Perhaps the rich man wrinkled his nose. Perhaps he quickened his pace. Perhaps not at all. The text suggests something worse, that passing by this man without seeing him had become such an ingrained habit that it no longer provoked any reaction. Each day the rich man stepped through that door. Each day his eyes passed over that wounded body as if it were part of the landscape. The fine linen garments, fabric that cost a year's wages for a laborer, brushed near the open wounds. The fragrance of feasts wafted across the threshold, torturing the hungry. The street dogs were more compassionate. They licked Lazarus's wounds, offered the only available comfort. And at night it was worse. Music escaped through the cracks. Laughter, conversations, the clinking of crystal glasses. Luke says the rich man feasted sumptuously every day, while Lazarus tried to find a less painful position for his wounded body. Inside, the wine flowed like water, and the text says he longed to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Crumbs. Not even those reached him. He had to compete with the dogs. The same dogs that licked his wounds competed with him for scraps. If this tension between what we know and what we do is resonating within you, mark this video. It's the simplest way to keep this reflection and help others find it. But why did the rich man act this way? Pure malice? Calculated cruelty? Jeremiah offers the diagnosis. Cursed is the man who trusts in man and makes flesh his strength, whose heart turns away from the Lord. The prophet speaks of a fundamental orientation of the soul. The rich man had built his world on human foundations, wealth, power, connections. His heart had curved so much inward that it lost the ability to see another. Have you ever observed what happens to plants growing the wrong way? I have a small garden at home. Once, a thyme plant started growing inward instead of reaching for the sun. The leaves turned yellow. The branches twisted. It's unnatural. The natural movement of a plant is outward and upward. When it grows inward, it withers. The human heart is like that. When it curves inward, when it becomes its own center of gravity, something essential is lost. The ability to see the other as they truly are.
as someone who carries the same fundamental dignity as you. Jeremiah compares this heart to a shrub in the desert. He is like a shrub in the wasteland, and shall not see any good come. He shall dwell in the parched places of the wilderness, in an uninhabited salt land. Like the thorns in the desert, Jeremiah says, a plant that survives in aridity, but survives alone. Its leaves are thorns, its growth a defense. Even when the rain comes, the thorn has lost the ability to absorb the blessing. It's become impermeable to grace. Can you see the image? That rich man, wearing expensive clothes, eating the finest foods, surrounded by friends and flatterers, was a thorn, surviving in spiritual aridity.
Becoming harder, thornier, more isolated in his apparent abundance. The rich man did not see Lazarus because he had trained his eyes to see only what confirmed his narrative of success. The beggar's wounds were an inconvenient evidence that the world had cracks. Easier to turn him into scenery, safer to treat him as urban furniture. Today we call it selective blindness or compassion fatigue, the almost infinite ability we have to overlook the pain of others, especially if that pain challenges our narrative that the world is fair and working well. It's a defense mechanism. We saw it every day in Jerusalem. Very religious people, on their way to the temple, avoiding beggars so they wouldn't be late for prayers. The irony is as old as the human heart. But Lazarus, what sustained Lazarus? The first psalm sings in response, "Blessed is the man who delights in the law of God and meditates on it day and night without ceasing." On the ground, competing for food with the dogs, Lazarus meditated. When hunger tightened its grip, he recited promises. When the wounds burned, he murmured psalms. His external poverty had created an internal space where only God could dwell. You see, when you lose everything, absolutely everything, one of two things happens. Either you lose yourself in the void, or you discover that the void can be filled with something not of this world. Some of the most radiant men and women I've known in my life had almost nothing materially, but they had eyes that shone as if they saw another world overlaid on this one. Lazarus was like that. His eyes, amidst the wounds, saw further. Each time the gate opened and the rich man passed by without seeing him, Lazarus recited, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Each time the smell of feasts tortured his hunger, he murmured, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." He is like a tree planted by streams of water, continues the psalmist. Brutal paradox. The man who had no access even to water to wash his wounds was compared to a tree by the river. But the river was internal. Invisible to the rich man's eyes, Lazarus extended roots seeking moisture this world did not offer. He is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever he does prospers. Another paradox. The man who seemed the very definition of failure carried a promise of prosperity the rich man, in all his abundance, could not comprehend. There is a prosperity the common eyes do not see. A type of fruit that cannot be gathered with hands. A harvest that only realizes in eternity. Who is the Lazarus you've been ignoring? It might be a person, it might be a truth, it might be a calling. Leave in the comments,
Who or what is waiting to be seen by you? Then they both died. Luke's stark phrase, "When the poor man died, he was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried." Notice the difference. For Lazarus, angelic escort, named destination, embrace of the patriarch. For the rich man, he was buried. Period. The text doesn't even bother describing the funeral that was surely grand. Now the pomp doesn't matter. Now only what always mattered, but was hidden. You see, death has this terrible and liberating power to reduce everything to the essential. I've been to funerals of important people with expensive coffins and long speeches, and I've been to simple funerals where the only decoration was true tears. Death is unimpressed by our titles, our bank accounts, our social media followers. It has eyes that penetrate all layers and see what we've truly built with our daily choices. When Lazarus died, there were no speeches, probably no funeral at all. Bodies like his were often tossed into a common grave without ceremony. But the unseen narrative, the one human eyes do not see, was very different. Luke says the angels carried him. There's a spectacular reversal here. The man who had no one to carry him in life was escorted by celestial beings in death. And where did they carry him? To Abraham's bosom, a Jewish expression for the place of highest honor, intimacy, and comfort. Abraham, the father of faith, opening his arms to receive the one the world rejected.
The text then contrasts. The rich man also died and was buried. The burial, which would normally indicate honor, here sounds like reduction. Just the continuation of the earthly narrative, body treated with deference, rituals observed, all according to protocol. But the heavenly narrative? The text is silent. There's no mention of angels, no mention of Abraham waiting, just the burial. The end point of a life that had already received all it requested. In the realm of the dead, the rich man lifts his eyes. First true gesture of his existence, to look up. And he sees Lazarus. For the first time, he truly sees. The Greek word used by Luke for see is interesting. Eparas tous ophthalmos, literally lifting the eyes. In life, the rich man's gaze passed over Lazarus as if he didn't exist. Now, for the first time, he has to lift his eyes. He has to look up to see the one he considered beneath him. And then the rich man does something revealing. He recognizes Lazarus by name. "Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue." He always knew the name, always knew who he was. Ignorance was a choice, not an accident. True faith leaves a trace. The rich man's speech is revealing on many levels. First, the use of the name shows that indifference was a conscious choice, not accidental ignorance. Second, even in torment, he still sees Lazarus as someone who should serve him. Send Lazarus. The chasm wasn't created by death. It existed in life. Third, he asks for a minimal gesture, the tip of the finger wet, which ironically equals the crumbs he denied the beggar. Abraham responds with terrible tenderness. "Child, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner bad things." It is not karma. It is not divine vengeance. It's simply the revelation of what has always been true.
The rich man chose his goods as his portion. He received exactly what he asked for, no more, no less. Lazarus chose God as his portion. He too received what he asked for. Notice how Abraham calls the rich man child. There is genuine compassion in this speech. There is no joy in seeing someone suffer, even someone who caused so much suffering. There is only the acknowledgement of a reality that can no longer be changed. Remember. Memory now becomes part of the torment. Remembering every time he passed by Lazarus, every missed opportunity, every choice that deepened the chasm. But the chasm, this chasm Abraham mentions, wasn't created in death. It was dug in life, decision by decision, diverted gaze by diverted gaze. Every time the rich man passed by Lazarus without seeing, he dug. Every splendid feast that ignored the hunger at the door deepened. Death merely revealed the spiritual geography that already existed. It is fascinating to note that the text speaks literally of a great chasm, chasma mega in Greek, between the two places. The word chasma is where we get our chasm. But this chasm wasn't created by God as an arbitrary barrier. It was the accumulated result of choices. The chasm was already there, invisible, when the rich man passed through the door and ignored Lazarus. Each choice to ignore the other's misery made the chasm a little wider, a little deeper. Does the rich man then demonstrate change? Repentance? He shows dynastic panic. Send Lazarus to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers. Even in torment, he still sees Lazarus as a servant. Even in the fire, he still thinks in terms of lineage and property. The hardened heart does not soften even in hell. Let's stop for a moment and reflect on this. It's a terrible portrait of the human condition, the almost infinite ability we have to cling to false narratives even when all evidence shows otherwise. The rich man already clearly sees his situation. He already understands he made wrong choices, but instead of asking for mercy for himself, he tries to save his dynasty. And notice the pattern. He wants to use Lazarus again. Send Lazarus appears for the second time. Even understanding that he is in the wrong place for having ignored this man in life, he still sees him as a utilitarian tool. The problem wasn't just the wealth, it was something much deeper. The inability to see the other as equal, as someone with the same intrinsic value.
Abraham's response echoes through the ages. They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. In other words, the necessary revelation is already available. The truth has already been spoken. The way has already been shown. This part of the parable is directed straight at the Pharisees who were listening to Jesus. They knew the law and the prophets. They knew the hundreds of instructions about caring for the poor, the widows, the foreigners. The problem was never lack of information. It was lack of application. They knew the sacred texts, but they did not let those texts transform their behavior. If you are hearing this now, you probably know the scriptures, or at least you've heard about loving your neighbor, caring for the needy, being compassionate. The problem isn't lack of information. It never was. It's always the gap between what we know and what we do, between knowledge and application. The rich man insists, if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent. Supreme irony. He himself is dead, experiencing the reality beyond, and has not repented. Changed address, not heart.
discovered hell, but not love. There's an even deeper irony for the first readers of Luke's Gospel. Jesus told this parable before his death and resurrection, but Luke's readers already knew Jesus had risen. They already knew someone had indeed come back from the dead to warn the living. And yet, many didn't believe. A man literally rose after 3 days in the tomb, was seen by hundreds of witnesses, and yet many didn't change their lives. This proves exactly what Jesus is teaching here. The problem is not lack of evidence. It's something much deeper and more resistant. The human heart that refuses to see what challenges its comfortable narrative. Abraham's final sentence is devastating. If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. Luke writes this decades after the resurrection of Christ. He knows that many saw the risen one and still did not believe. The problem was never lack of evidence. It was an excess of self-sufficiency. If this questioning about the chasms we unknowingly create touched something in you, subscribe to the channel. It's what we do here. Confront the truths we prefer to turn into scenery. True faith leaves a trace. Jeremiah had diagnosed, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it?" The human heart has an infinite capacity for self-deception. It can look at a man covered in sores and not see a brother. It can wear purple over a soul in decay. It can confuse blessing with shielding. It's a severe diagnosis, but liberating. Severe because it offers no escape. We all have this potential for self-deception. Liberating because, once recognized, we can seek the antidote. And the antidote is not trying to be better on our own. It's a complete reorientation of the soul. Jeremiah continues, "I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind, to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds." Only God can fully search the depths of the human heart. Only He knows all the detours and shortcuts we create to justify our selfishness. But the prophet also offers hope. "Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord." It's about the location of trust. Lazarus had nothing to trust but God. That radical poverty became his eternal wealth. And here we return to the beginning of the story. The name Lazarus means God helps or God aids. The man who seemed most abandoned by God carried in his very name the promise that he was not alone. The rich man, the one who seemed to have everything, has no name in the text. He's identified only by his goods, his clothes, his parties. It's as if Jesus is saying, when you choose material goods as your portion, you lose something essential. You lose your true identity. The psalm concludes singing two destinies. Whatever he does prospers for the one who meditates on God's law. They are like chaff that the wind drives away for those who trust in themselves. Whoever roots in God finds eternal stability. Whoever roots in themselves will discover they've built on sand. And this is the choice each of us makes, day after day. In the small, continuous decisions, in how we treat those at our door, in the attention we give to the needs around us, and how we use the resources entrusted to us.
Lazarus and the rich man are eternal human types. They are possible choices for each of us. The clothes have changed, the technology has changed, but the human heart, it still tends to curl in on itself and lose the ability to see the other. But here remains the question that Lazarus and the rich man pose to us. Who's at your door? Perhaps a difficult family member, a despised colleague, an uncomfortable truth. Someone or something you've turned into scenery to avoid dealing with. Each time we pass by without seeing, we dig. Each time we stop and truly see, we build a bridge. The chasm doesn't emerge in death. It's architected in life, gesture by gesture, choice by choice. Lazarus died and was embraced. The rich man died and was buried. One cultivated a hunger for eternity, while the other was satisfied with temporal crumbs. One extended roots seeking the living water. The other vegetated in the dryness of his self-sufficiency. You know, I've seen many rich who were like Lazarus inside. Knowing their wealth was a responsibility, not a privilege. And I've seen many poor who were like the rich man, embittered, self-centered, unable to see beyond themselves. It's about what you do with what you have. And more importantly, it's about who you become through your daily choices. There's still time. There's still choice. The door is still open. The prophets still speak. Moses still teaches. Christ has risen and offers life. The question is, are we willing to lift our eyes? Or do we prefer to continue in the feast, pretending the chasm is not being dug, ignoring that one day, inevitably, we too will die? Death appears in this parable as a revealer. It creates nothing new. It only shows clearly what was already there, hidden under layers of self-deception and distraction. When the veil is removed, what remains is the naked truth of the soul. What we've built, what we've planted, what we've nurtured in the secret garden of the heart. And when that day comes, what we've cultivated will determine our destiny. As the natural flowering of what we've planted in the secret garden of the heart. True faith leaves a trace. Lazarus left his. It's in Abraham's embrace. The rich man left his. It's in the denied request. What trace are you leaving? And when death reveals all chasms and all bridges, when the masks fall and the fine clothes dissolve, when only the naked truth of what we've cultivated in the heart remains, on which side of the chasm will you be? The answer is being written now, decision by decision, gaze by gaze, gesture by gesture. Lazarus knew this. That's why he waited. The rich man found out too late. That's why he burns. And us? We still have today. We still have a choice. We still have time to lift our eyes, recognize who's at our door, and decide. Will we continue digging chasms or start building bridges? Eternity awaits our answer. And it demands, always demands, in the currency of truth. The video appearing now delves into another dimension of this truth. Here is where we study the sacred texts seeking the truth that transforms. Leave in the comments, What Lazarus is at your door, waiting to be seen?